I've been lucky enough to spend my Thanksgiving break down in Baja, about 20 minutes outside of San Jose del Cabo on the east cape of the peninsula. About 40 minutes north of where I stay is a very special place called Cabo Pulmo. Here in Cabo Pulmo is where you can find the only coral reef in all of Baja. It's one of the most beautiful places I've ever had the pleasure to visit, but it hasn't always been so pretty. For decades, overfishing and poor treatment of the coast led to the number of fish diminishing, and the reef would frequently bleach. In my annotated bibliography and in my other classes, I have focused primarily on coral reefs and how they're being threatened with climate change, as well as conservation efforts focused around them. What I'm holding here is the skeleton of what once was a colony of corals. Corals, while they can become easily confused with plants or even a rock, are actually an animal, or rather, a colony of genetically identical animals. And if you look closely, you'll see the little holes where each individual animal lived. The individual animals themselves are called polyps, and they look a little something like this. They're quite simple animals that consist of tentacles and a stomach, and that's about it. They don't even have a brain. What's so fascinating about corals is that they have a mutualistic relationship with a single-celled type of plant called zooxanthellae, which is likened to algae. Now, if you look closely again, you can actually see that the zooxanthellae lives in the tentacles of the polyps, and actually gives the polyps their color. Without them, they'd be completely see-through. This mutualism occurs because the corals give the zooxanthellae a place to live, while in return, the zooxanthellae give nutrients to the corals. Now, since corals are animals, they can't eat themselves, but they do get the vast amount of the nutrients through this mutualism. This relationship is important to note because when corals bleach, it's really just the polyp kicking out the zooxanthellae, which is why the corals appear to turn white. This bleaching happens when corals get agitated when ocean temperatures rise higher than usual. Global ocean temperatures are on the rise due to climate change and the increase of carbon dioxide gas in the atmosphere. And excess carbon dioxide in the ocean is changing the pH of the water as well, turning it more acidic than it usually is. Both of these factors threaten coral reefs worldwide, and many scientists believe that all corals could be gone by 2050 if current trends continue the way they are. And that concludes my depressing biology lesson. Now on to the success story of Cabo Pulmo. In the 20th century, both local fishermen and commercial fishermen from San Jose del Cabo would fish the area. By the early 1900s, the area had so little fish that it had started to have an effect on the reef, which would frequently bleach. The small village of Cabo Pulmo recognized that fishing needed to stop in the area in order to ensure the survival of the reef. One family understood this best, the Castro family. Their family had been in the village for over 100 years, and 3 generations of the family agreed that they needed to make a change. They approached their community, as well as the local fishermen, with a plan to head into San Jose del Cabo to speak with local government officials about creating a preserve in the area, which would discontinue fishing in the area and would better help the survival of the fish in the area as well as the reef. The Castro family each told their stories to the government officials about why the area of Cabo Pulmo should be considered a national park and how it would benefit the surrounding areas as well, since the return of fish to this area would mean that it would indirectly increase the populations of the surrounding area as well as the fact that this was the only coral reef in the peninsula of Baja, and it should be a priority to be protected. This story eventually made it all the way up the chain of command to the national government, where in 1995 the region of Cabo Pulmo was added to the Mexico's national system of protected areas. Since where I stay is so close and I have visited the area before, I headed back this break to spend a day snorkeling the reefs and talking to the locals about this event, which is how I was able to learn more about how it became a protected area. In my broken Spanish and in their broken English, it was super interesting to hear the stories from the locals who were around during the time it became a national park and their experience with how the community made it happen, as well as how they saw the life on the reef return firsthand. I wasn't able to speak directly with any of the Castro family members themselves, but second-hand accounts were still super cool to hear. In the 25 years since it has been named a national park, the biomass of the area has exploded an incredible 460%. The growth of the area has proven to be so effective that it has spilled over into other reef areas and regions. While this conservation effort will only have an effect in the regional area, it is a glimmer of hope for coral reefs all around the world as an example of how an area can recover from looking almost dead to overflowing with life. This is also an example of how personal experience and the use of a story can be used in conservational efforts, which in the case of Cabo Pulmo has proven to be successful.